I never thought much about eye appointments. They were just those things you did once a year, in and out, update your prescription, maybe get new frames if you were feeling adventurous. Routine, clinical, forgettable. But that changed the day I met Dr. Lysander Chen, and suddenly I found myself hoping my vision would get worse just so I'd have a reason to come back. It started on a Tuesday morning in October. I'd been putting off my eye exam for months, mostly because my current glasses were fine and I hate making appointments for anything. But my insurance was about to reset and I figured I should use the benefits before they disappeared. I found a new optometry practice near my apartment in the city, one of those modern places with minimalist furniture and plants everywhere, the kind that makes you feel like you're getting a lifestyle upgrade just by walking through the door. The receptionist was friendly enough, handed me a clipboard with the standard forms. I filled them out quickly, checked all the boxes about family history and current medications, signed the HIPAA stuff without reading it like everyone does. Then I sat down and scrolled through my phone, not really paying attention to anything, just killing time. When they called my name, I followed a technician back to a small room where she ran me through the preliminary tests. The machine that puffs air into your eyes, the one that makes you flinch every single time even though you know it's coming. Reading letters off a chart, looking at a hot air balloon in a field while she took photos of my retinas. All standard stuff. She was efficient and quiet, making notes on her tablet, and then she said the doctor would be in shortly. I waited maybe 3 minutes, staring at a poster about macular degeneration, when the door opened and he walked in. I noticed his hands first. Long fingers, careful movements as he washed them at the small sink in the corner. Then he turned around and introduced himself, and I had to actively remind myself to maintain normal eye contact instead of just staring like an idiot. Dr. Lysander Chen was probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead, in a way that looked effortlessly perfect. He wore thin-framed glasses that somehow made him look both intellectual and approachable, and when he smiled at me, I felt something shift in my chest that I wasn't quite prepared for. He had this presence about him, calm and focused, like he was genuinely interested in being there, in doing his job well, in talking to me specifically. Most doctors I'd seen had this hurried energy, like they were already thinking about the next patient. But Lysander sat down on his rolling stool, pulled up my chart on the computer, and actually looked at me while we talked. We went through my medical history. Any changes in my vision? Any headaches? How much screen time daily? He asked follow-up questions that showed he was actually listening to my answers, not just checking boxes. His voice was warm, measured, the kind of voice that could probably make reading a phone book sound interesting. Then came the actual exam. He dimmed the lights and moved closer with the phoropter, that big machine with all the lenses. I could smell his cologne, something subtle and clean, and I became hyper-aware of how close his face was to mine as he switched between lenses. Which is better? 1 or 2? 1 or 2? The questions came in a steady rhythm, his fingers moving precisely over the dials. I found myself focusing more on the sound of his voice than on the actual letters I was supposed to be reading. At one point he leaned in even closer to adjust something, and I held my breath without meaning to. He was professional, completely professional, but there were these tiny moments that I couldn't stop analysing. The way his hand briefly touched my shoulder when he asked me to look up, the half-second longer than necessary that he maintained eye contact after I answered a question, the small smile when I made a stupid joke about needing a prescription for reading my own handwriting. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was just projecting because I found him attractive, and it had been a while since I'd felt that immediate pull towards someone. Maybe this was just how he was with all his patients and I was reading way too much into basic human kindness. The exam wrapped up and he rolled back to the computer to enter his notes. My prescription had barely changed, he told me. 0.25 in one eye, nothing in the other. Basically the same as last year. I could keep my current glasses if I wanted, or update them for the tiny change, totally up to me. I should have said thanks and left. Should have scheduled my next annual exam and gone on with my day. But instead I heard myself asking questions I didn't really need answers to. What about computer glasses? Were blue light filters worth it? How often should I really be getting checked? He answered everything patiently, thoroughly, like he had all the time in the world. And then, as I was standing up to leave, he did something unexpected. He asked if I worked nearby. I told him I did, just a few blocks away at a tech startup. He nodded and mentioned there was a good coffee place around the corner from the office, said he grabbed lunch there sometimes. It was such a casual comment, thrown in as I was literally walking toward the door, and I couldn't tell if it meant anything or if he was just making conversation. I thought about that interaction for the rest of the day, replayed it during meetings, while answering emails on my commute home, analysed every word, every inflection, tried to decide if I was being delusional or if there had actually been something there, some spark of mutual interest. By the time I went to bed that night, I'd convinced myself I was being ridiculous. He was my optometrist. He'd been doing his job. That was it. Except 2 days later, I was grabbing coffee at the place he'd mentioned and he walked in. Our eyes met across the cafe, and there was this moment of recognition, of surprise that didn't quite feel like surprise. He smiled, that same warm smile from the exam room, and walked over. We ended up sitting together. What started as a quick hello turned into an hour-long conversation that ranged from work to the city, to books we were reading, to places we wanted to travel. He was easy to talk to, genuinely interesting and interested. He asked questions that went deeper than small talk, and when he laughed at something I said, it felt like a small victory. Before we parted ways, he mentioned he was there most Thursdays around noon, in case I ever wanted company for lunch. It was an invitation, clear but casual, leaving me the option to pursue it or not. I showed up the next Thursday, and the Thursday after that. It became our thing, this weekly lunch that neither of us officially acknowledged as anything more than two people who happened to eat at the same time in the same place. But it was more. I knew it was more by the way I started looking forward to Thursdays with an intensity that felt disproportionate to a casual lunch. By the way I'd catch myself thinking about things to tell him, storing up small observations and stories throughout the week. By the way my heart would speed up when I walked into the cafe and saw him already there, saving me a seat. We talked about everything except the obvious thing hovering between us. He told me about growing up in Seattle, about deciding to go into optometry because he loved the intersection of health and immediate problem solving. I told him about my family in Ohio, about moving to the city 3 years ago to escape the small-town feeling of always being known, always being watched. There was something in that last comment, in the way I said it, that made him pause. He looked at me for a long moment, and I wondered if he understood what I wasn't quite saying. That I'd left home partly because being gay there felt like wearing clothes that didn't fit, like everyone was waiting for you to explain yourself. He didn't push, didn't ask directly, but he mentioned an ex-boyfriend in passing the next week, dropped it into conversation so naturally that it took me a second to register what he'd said. And then I felt this wave of relief so strong it almost made me dizzy. I matched his casual tone, mentioned someone I'd dated last year, and just like that we'd established this understanding between us. We were both out, both comfortable with it, both testing the waters to see if this thing we were doing was going where it seemed to be going. The touches started small, his hand on my arm when he was making a point, our knees bumping under the small cafe table. The way he'd lean in close to show me something on his phone, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. I wanted to kiss him, wanted it so badly that some Thursdays I could barely focus on the conversation because I was too busy thinking about what it would feel like, how he'd taste, whether he wanted it too. But there was this complicated thing hanging over us. He was technically my doctor. There were probably ethics rules about this, professional boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. Neither of us mentioned it, but it was there, this invisible line we were both aware of. Then one Thursday in December, about 2 months after we'd started meeting, he didn't show up. I waited for 20 minutes, checking my phone obsessively, wondering if I'd gotten the day wrong or if something had come up. Finally I texted him. Just a casual, "Hey, everything okay?" No response. I tried not to spiral, tried not to assume the worst, but my brain went there anyway. Maybe he'd realised this was a bad idea. Maybe someone at his office had said something about fraternising with patients. Maybe I'd misread everything and he'd just been being friendly and now he was ghosting me to avoid an awkward conversation. He texted me that night. "I'm so sorry about today. Family emergency. Can I call you?" We'd never talked on the phone before. All our communication had been in person or through brief text messages to confirm lunch plans. Hearing his voice in my ear, without the buffer of the cafe noise and other people, felt intimate in a way that made my hands shake slightly. His grandmother had had a stroke. He was at the hospital, had been there since early morning, and he sounded exhausted and worried and like he needed someone to talk to. So I listened, asked the right questions, let him process his fear and frustration, and guilt about not visiting her more often. We talked for almost 2 hours. At some point the conversation shifted from his grandmother to other things, deeper things. He told me about losing his father when he was in college, about how it had shaped his relationship with medicine and mortality. I told him about coming out to my parents, about the year of silence that followed before we slowly rebuilt something that resembled a relationship. There was something about the darkness, about not being able to see each other's faces that made it easier to be honest, to say things we might not have said across a cafe table in broad daylight. Before we hung up, he said my name in this soft way that made my breath catch. Thank you for this, for listening. I needed it. I wanted to tell him he could call me any time, that I'd always listen, that I was maybe falling for him in a way that terrified and excited me in equal measure. But instead, I just said I was glad I could help, and that I hoped his grandmother would be okay. She recovered slowly over the next few weeks. He kept me updated through texts that grew longer and more frequent. We couldn't do our Thursday lunches because his schedule was chaotic, split between the office and the hospital and helping his mother manage everything. But we stayed connected, and somehow the distance made things clearer. I missed him in a way that went beyond missing a friend or a casual lunch companion. I missed his smile, his laugh, the way he looked at me like I was saying something worth hearing. I missed the possibility of him, of us, of whatever this could become if we let it. In early January he texted me, "Lunch tomorrow? I have something I need to talk to you about." My stomach dropped. That phrase never meant anything good. I barely slept that night, convinced he was going to tell me we needed to stop meeting, that it was inappropriate, that he'd thought about it and decided the professional conflict was too much. I got to the cafe early, ordered my coffee with hands that weren't quite steady and waited. When he walked in, he looked nervous. He sat down across from me, didn't order anything, just folded his hands on the table and took a breath. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I think you probably already know, but I need to say it out loud." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I like you," he continued. "More than like you. I think about you constantly. I look forward to Thursdays all week. When my grandmother was in the hospital, you were the person I wanted to talk to. And I know this is complicated because technically you're my patient, but I checked the ethics guidelines and as long as I refer you to another optometrist, there's no conflict." He said it all in a rush, like he'd been rehearsing it, and then he looked at me with this expression that was hopeful and terrified and so vulnerable it made my chest ache. "I've already transferred your file," he added, "to my colleague Dr. Morrison. She's excellent. You'd like her. So I'm not your doctor anymore, and I needed you to know that before I asked if you wanted to have dinner with me. Like an actual date, not just Thursday lunch." I started laughing, not because it was funny, but because the relief was so overwhelming I didn't know what else to do. He looked momentarily panicked until I reached across the table and took his hand. "Yes," I said. "I want to have dinner with you. I've wanted that since about 5 minutes into my eye exam." His whole face lit up. "Really? Really? I thought I was going crazy. Reading into every little interaction. I almost scheduled a fake follow-up appointment just to have an excuse to see you again." He laughed, squeezed my hand, and suddenly everything felt easy and right and possible. We had dinner that Friday at a small Italian place in his neighbourhood. We held hands across the table. We talked for hours, covering everything we'd been holding back during our careful Thursday lunches. And when he walked me to my car afterward, he kissed me in the parking lot under the streetlights, soft and tentative at first, then deeper when I pulled him closer. That was 6 months ago. We've been together ever since, and it's the kind of relationship I didn't know I was looking for until I found it. Easy and comfortable, but also exciting, built on actual friendship and genuine connection. My vision is still fine, by the way. I saw Dr. Morrison for my follow-up like Lysander arranged, and she confirmed that nothing had changed. But Lysander jokes that he'll always be watching, making sure I don't need any adjustments. He's protective that way, caring in the small everyday ways that matter. Sometimes I think about that first appointment, how close I came to just keeping my old glasses and skipping the whole thing. How different my life would be if I hadn't walked into that office on a random Tuesday morning. It's strange how the smallest decisions can redirect everything, how love can show up in the most unexpected places. I never thought I'd fall for my optometrist, never imagined that a routine eye exam would lead to the best relationship of my life. But Lysander helped me see clearly in more ways than one. He helped me see that sometimes the things we're looking for are right in front of us, waiting for us to focus.